Grant Quick's Pleasure Palace was enhanced a good deal over the years, but one could never say it was pretty. No, it was built for dancing, and its reputation for having one of the best dance floors in the country and some of the best dance bands to be found continued after World War II. Today we would call this a very effective brand, and it brought people in. The bands constantly changed, but remained top-notch. In the 1930s, the band of Art Jewett was very popular. In the early 1940s, there were names like sax player Tom Gimley. The Riccio brothers, 3 of them, played at Presqu'île. The famous RCAF Streamliner dance band who toured Europe during the war. 2 local musicians played at the Pavilion in the early 1940s. Ben Thompson, Dan Thompson's father, who became a lawyer and judge, as well as Ted Snider, who would come back later with his own band, and more about him shortly. Remember the snack bar? Hamburger, potato chips, and pop, all night long. And lots of dancing. In 1946 and 1947, the band at Presqu'île Pavilion was the Ted Snider Band. Ted was a local boy that grew up at Smithfield. He played at Presqu'île in the early 1940s and now came back with his own band. And they were an excellent band. Ted was on the trumpet, as you see on the far right, and there were other horns, as well as piano, drums, and a few strings. The dance floor at the Pleasure Palace was crowded during these summer nights. This casual photo of the band in 1946 in front of the hotel shows the band leader in the middle with his signature trumpet. He would go on to have an outstanding career as a band leader and a radio personality. Everybody around Trenton and Brighton area knew Ted Snider. Dancing 6 nights a week. This was the clarion call. It was in newspaper advertisements and posters all over the area. Grant Quick hired the band for the summer and provided bunks at the back of the pavilion. They stayed at Presqu'île and played almost every day in one capacity or another. And it wasn't only fast dancing. There was lots of waltzing and even some square dancing, as you can see here. Of course, what would a dance pavilion be without lots of pretty girls? One particular story about Presqu'île Pavilion comes from Betty Weber, who was a teenager in the early 1940s, spending the summers with her girlfriends at Presqu'île. She wrote about the excitement and emotions of teenage girls planning their day around going to the pavilion at night. They worked in groups, carefully planning every move, trying to get a dance with that special fella. The ideal situation was to have the last dance before an intermission, which increased the chance of a walk down to the dock or even to the lighthouse. She also wrote of the tears that flowed on closing night, when friends celebrated the fun of the past summer and realized they would not meet again until next summer. In particular, those who had been lucky enough to experience puppy love were especially sad to see the summer end. So many years later, these memories are clear and bright. The Squealer contained a lot of information about events at the Point, as well as what was going on with the cottagers, who made up a changing but community-oriented group. One ad says, "Dancing at Presqu'île Pleasure Palace 6 nights a week. Music by Ted Snider and his 9-piece band. Grant Quick, manager." Another reminds park visitors about the fire hazard. In 1922, the Presqu'île Park Commission was created by the province to manage Presqu'île Park. 5 local men were appointed and they acted as the municipal government, improving the roads and publishing notices like this one to be careful of fire. And of course, there were always lots of boats for rent at the hotel. During the 1950s, lots of things changed. In 1954, Presqu'île Park came under the Provincial Parks Act, which was designed to change the emphasis of land use in parks. Very quickly, the environment became much more important, and the objective became preservation of natural habitat. Camping was encouraged, but private use of the land was reduced dramatically. Leases were bought out, and land was expropriated, and many people left the park lands. Then in 1957, the sliver of land along the bay shore where the cottages were, along with the hotel and pavilion, were severed from Presqu'île Park and became part of Brighton Township, to be managed by the local municipal government. In the broader society, much was changing too. Post-war prosperity meant that many more families had more time and more money for recreation. Roads were better and more people had cars, which meant they could travel a lot farther for their holidays. TVs quickly became required furniture as folks learned more about holiday options at greater distance from home. Along with this, new roads like the 401 provided much easier access to attractions that were farther away. During this time, resort hotels all around Ontario experienced a gradual reduction in demand, and Presqu'île was no exception. But the Saturday night dances at the Pavilion continued through to the late 1960s. In the last few years of the 1960s, the Pavilion was my primary destination on summer Saturday nights. With a clean shirt, my dad's car, and a few bucks, I headed to the point to meet up with a few of my buddies at the Pavilion. We usually parked way up the road to the west, since the parking lot was full by the time we got there. As I walked down the road past the parking area, I always knew there was somebody at their car grabbing a snort of some kind of beverage. And of course, there were some cars with steamed-up windows. Not my business. At the front door, you always saw the same thing. Just to the right, inside the door, Mr. Quick was sitting at a small table, taking the money. Behind him were his assistants. We hung around, gabbed, ate potato chips, drank pop, all the while watching the activity on the dance floor and soaking in the music. Dan Thompson had persuaded Mr. Quick that money could be made from teenagers who wanted to hear the newfangled and very loud rock and roll. It proved to be a great success for a few years. As a teenager at the Pavilion, I remember the feeling of tension in the air. The music, the warm summer nights, all the people. Anything seemed possible, both good and bad. But one reason I felt safe going there was that Grant Quick and his assistants were in charge. We knew we wouldn't have any trouble at the Pavilion. Yes, Presqu'île Pavilion was a lot of fun for many of us. But then, it was all over. In 1971, Grant Quick passed away. Without him as the driving force and with a changing world, the viability of both the hotel and the Pavilion could not be continued. In 1972, there was a sad but historic day at Presqu'île when all of the contents of the hotel and Pavilion were auctioned off. Everything went, right down to the doilies and promotional material. Very quickly after that, the buildings were demolished. I'm told that the dance floor went to the barn in Myersburg and continued its service for a time. Very quickly, developers moved in and several lovely new homes were built on the site. But sometimes as I drive by there, I can't help but feel sad to see the old government dock sitting there all quiet and lonely. It makes me remember a much different time. For the Brighton Town Hall, the end was sudden and violent. There had been plenty of discussion during the first few years of the 1970s about whether to spend the money to fix up the old and deteriorating structure or to tear it down and build a modern municipal office. Then, on Lucky Friday, July 13th, 1973, a tornado roared down Main Street and demolished the old town hall in a few seconds. The decision was made. Thankfully, there were no serious injuries, but it was a sad thing to see the state of the old Opera House and Town Hall, as well as all those beautiful trees that used to form a canopy over Main Street. It was truly the end of an era. Both of our favorite places gone. Life went on without the Pleasure Palace and the Opera House. New venues were developed to support the growing need for events, including the Community Centre at King Edward Park and the Codrington Community Centre. The old standby sites such as the Masonic Lodge and the Legion continued to host events. Our taste in dance halls and the music we love evolved over the years. But the memories we cherish of those popular places, the Presqu'île Pavilion and the Opera House and the Town Hall in Brighton, represent an important part of the personal lives of each of us, as well as a very key element of the heritage landscape of our community. Dance hall days are still there for us to remember and enjoy.